Wales, maybe southwest England catching a shower or two, but much of the Midlands, southern and eastern England will be dry for most of the day with some sunny spells. A fresher feel, though, with a brisk wind, particularly gusty across northern Scotland. And coming into western Scotland, more rain through Tuesday night and into Wednesday, and that could cause some problems. The rain potentially starts to really build up later this week. Some of that rain on Wednesday affecting parts of Northern Ireland, particularly the north coast. For England and Wales, again, a few showers in the west, but many places dry and bright. Temperatures around average for the time of year. There are signs, particularly in the south, that things will warm up later this week. Bye for now.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, the Tory party conference in Manchester is in full swing and by gosh, there is a lot to unpick. So much I want to ask you tonight. Is the Tory party united in your mind? And if not, do you reckon this fragmentation that seems to be happening will prove to be their undoing? And Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, he has benefits in his sight. He's in essence saying that too many people seem to be choosing a life on the dole, and he wants to try and put a stop to it. His critics, though, say he's scapegoating the poorest in society. What says you? And of course, the talk of cutting tax rumbles rumbles on. So I'm asking you now, do you think the time for that is now? And if so, where would you begin? Liz Truss, she reckons you could start perhaps with corporation tax, get that back down to 19%. And the Manc leg of HS2, will they, won't they? It rumbles on, whatever is going on there. I cannot help but wonder, who on earth is leaking this stuff, this distraction right now? What is to be gained from it? We've got it all to come, but before we get into all of that tonight, let's grab the latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Well, the main news tonight is that the Greater Manchester Mayor is saying that axing the northern leg of HS2 would be the desperate act of a dying government. That, as Number 10 has told GB News, that no decisions have been taken as yet. Andy Burnham has called on the Prime Minister to end this shambles on HS2, and it follows increased speculation about the rail project's future. With a number of government ministers calling for the project to be reviewed due to spiralling costs, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, now says it shouldn't cost 10 times more to build a railway in the UK than just across the Channel in France. Well, also in the news today, a second police force is investigating allegations against the comedian Russell Brand. In a statement, Thames Valley Police said it's received new information relating to harassment and stalking allegations dating back to 2018. They added it would be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing investigation. It follows a joint investigation by the Sunday Times and Channel 4. Russell Brand denies all accusations of criminality against him. Now, the Chancellor has announced plans to freeze the expansion of the civil service and reduce its numbers to pre-pandemic levels. During his speech at Conservative Party conference in Manchester, Jeremy Hunt said it would save the government £1 billion next year. Meanwhile, the Chancellor announced tougher benefit sanctions on those who are capable of working but choose not to, and a national living wage rise to £11 an hour.
We promised in our manifesto to raise the national living wage to 2/3 of median income, ending low pay in this country. At the moment, it's £10.42 an hour, and we're waiting for the Low Pay Commission to tell us next year's recommendation. But I confirm today, whatever that recommendation, we'll increase the national living wage to at least £11 an hour next year. That's a pay rise for 2 million workers.
Well, the former Prime Minister Liz Truss at the same party conference has been calling on the Chancellor to cut corporation tax. She says back to 19% for his next autumn statement. Speaking at a fringe rally in Manchester, the former Prime Minister urged the Tory leadership to axe the tax, cut bills and build homes. Her comments came after Jeremy Hunt told GB News no substantial tax cuts are possible this year. Ms Truss said businesses are now choosing not to locate in the UK and they shouldn't be treated like a cash cow.
We need to unleash business across Britain. We need people to want to invest in our country. We need businesses to be able to expand, to grow, to create new jobs, to create new ideas. That's why I'm calling upon the Chancellor at the autumn statement to put corporation tax back down to 19%. And frankly, if we can get it lower, the better.
Well, in news away from home, former President Donald Trump has arrived at a court in New York, in the United States, where he's due to stand trial in a civil fraud case. A warning if you're watching on television, the following does contain some flashing images. Well, the former president is accused of inflating the value of his assets by billions of dollars to secure better loan and insurance terms. Speaking outside the courtroom, Mr. Trump claimed he was the victim.
It was never a problem. Everything was perfect. There was no crime. The crime is against me because we have a corrupt district attorney, but we have a corrupt attorney general, and it all comes down from the DOJ that totally coordinated this in Washington because I'm the leading candidate, I'm leading Biden by 10 points.
Here at home, using mobile phones in schools should be banned. That's according to the Education Secretary. Gillian Keegan says the move would improve the overall behaviour and education of students and cut down on online bullying. New guidance from the Department for Education will back head teachers in banning them throughout the school day, including at break times. And junior doctors and consultants in England have begun their three-day walkout today, the longest ever period of joint strike action. Until Thursday at 7 a.m, they're going to be delivering what's being described as Christmas Day levels of staffing. Their last joint strike in September led to almost 130,000 appointments having to be rescheduled. The government says the walkout is doing a massive disservice to patients, but these doctors told GB News why they've gone on strike.
Until and unless there is a credible pay offer, it will mean that doctors of all grades, but especially senior doctors, will continue to leave the country for other places, and the NHS will continue to suffer.
We are not planning for the future. There is going to be no staffing in the NHS. There's going to be no NHS in the future if we don't fight for our pay. But this isn't really necessarily a fight about individual consultant pay per se. We're actually fighting for the very future of the NHS.
Consultants and junior doctors speaking earlier on the picket line today. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me to get into the goings-on of the day, I've got the historian and the broadcaster David Starkey and the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Good evening to both of you. Welcome. You know the drill, don't you, on this show? It's not just about us three. It is very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Lots of you have been getting in touch with me today. Andy has said, I've watched a number of the speeches at the Tory conference today and I found concrete blocks more inspiring and animated. Cool, blimey, Andy, you're a harsh man. You are a harsh man, kicking off there with a little bit of harshness. But of course, as Andy has just been alluding to there, the Tory party conference has indeed kicked off. We are going to get into all of the goings-on. I'm fascinated to hear what you think of some of the proposals made there. So let's bring ourselves up to speed, though, by crossing live to Manchester with the GB News political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Good evening to you, Catherine. Bring us up to speed, if you will. What has been going on there today?
Yes, well, a very busy day at conference. The main event really was the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt's speech, which was not that long, actually, and didn't have very much detail. He said he didn't want taxes to be high forever, but a total absence of any news on tax cuts. I suspect we will wait to the spring for those, if and when they come, saying that cracking down on benefits, that people actively have to be trying to get work harder than before, announcing an increase in the living wage. But really, that speech has been completely overshadowed by two things. First of all, HS2, the will it, won't it go from Birmingham to Manchester. There's been huge speculation over the last couple of weeks. Now, the government are insisting that no decision has been made. But I was told from an impeccable source earlier on this afternoon that the decision has been made, that HS2 will not go from Birmingham to Manchester, and that the Prime Minister will announce that in his speech on Wednesday. So let's see what happens. The thinking apparently is that they'll sweeten this very bitter pill by promising to spend a lot of the money that would have been spent on HS2 on transport across the north of England, on roads, on potholes, on east-west connectivity. But 16 million people in the north of England that have heard about fast rail from west to east will, I think, be possibly a little sceptical. The other big event that's drawn a lot of attention is Liz Truss's speech. Now, Rishi Sunak is sort of haunted by the ghosts of prime ministers past. Theresa May is due to speak at an event in just half an hour or so. But Liz Truss here, of course, it's only a year to the day since she had to backtrack as prime minister on her plan to cut the top rate of tax. But she's here, she's totally unabashed. Her message is, as it has always been, tax cuts are needed, bring down corporation tax and growth, all about growth and how to get growth. So I don't think Rishi Sunak will particularly appreciate her interventions. He'll be taking a bit of heart from the fact that the polls seem to be shifting slightly, but lots of talk really about HS2, and quite ironic that the conference is being held in what was previously a railway station.
Yeah, Catherine, who's doing this? Because we're going to get into HS2 before the end of my programme, but who is doing this leaking? I can't quite understand what's going on. Is this coming from within the Tory party? Is this, well, who is doing this? Because surely this is damaging to the Tories.
Well, it absolutely is. And these leaks have been going on now for a good couple of weeks, because it's been reported repeatedly over the last couple of weeks that HS2 is going to be scrapped, and Rishi Sunak has been absolutely tight-lipped about it. But really, whatever you think about the rights and wrongs about whether HS2 should have ever been built in the first place, it's not a great look, is it, to be in Manchester, in the city which looks likely to lose that rail link. And Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, horrified really, because he's saying that they've had no involvement, nobody has consulted them at all, and he's also saying that they need that HS2 link. It's integral, he says, to Northern Powerhouse Rail as well. So I think pretty damaging for the government. They like to do things on their own terms, but yeah, all eyes on Rishi Sunak on Wednesday and what he may say in his speech.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much. That was Catherine Forster there, our political correspondent, live from the Tory party conference in Manchester. Do you regard, David Starkey, do you regard the Conservative Party as a united front at the moment?
No, obviously not. But then, remember, in a two-party system, by definition, parties are coalitions. The question is whether the coalition can be kept together and on what terms. I mean, think of the Labour Party, where you've actually got its former leader, its immediate former leader, expelled from the party. And his second command, as far as I think MacDonald was expelled as well, was
no, Diane Abbott, for different reasons.
But you have this situation in which there are overt rifts on both sides. At the moment, Starmer is able to control it better because there is the prospect of office. For the Tories, it's the opposite. There's a prospect of losing office. And there's, I think, something else which is even bigger. If we set aside the peculiar Corbyn years, ever since really 2010, both of our main parties have started to look more and more like each other, to sponsor more and more the same policies, with the result, of course, that there are people in the Tory party like Caroline Noakes who could easily, very easily, be Labour or Lib Dem.
We spoke about Caroline Noakes a lot, I remember last...
She'll be very pleased. She just loves publicity.
Well, yes. Less said about that, the better for now. But your thoughts on this? I cannot understand, right, the Tory party. Things don't seem to be going fantastically well for them. So at the time where you need more than ever some form of united front, some form of, single direction of travel. Let's all rally around whatever core set of principles and policies and all the rest of it is, even if perhaps you're not fully on board with them. But that doesn't seem to be happening.
No, it's exactly the opposite, isn't it? And the reason is that most people in Manchester think that the Tories have already lost the next election, and they're getting ready for who's going to be the next leader. And so you've got Kemi Badenoch, you've got Suella Braverman, you've got Priti Patel, all putting out their stall and actually not...
And the ghost of Liz Truss.
And the ghost of Liz,
rather like Banquo turning up at the feast.
Well,
yes,
I mean, and Liz Truss just causing trouble. I mean, no apology, nothing, just saying,
I was right. I was right. Je ne regrette rien.
Absolutely.
If only she was good-looking and the voice was equally good. But I think there's another point, which is...
about women's looks.
Well, I think we can. I'm prepared to have women talk about rugby players' bottoms because I'm quite excited to them too.
Let's talk about the politics. But what we've seriously got. So you've got Andrew Mitchell, who's a Secretary of State for International Development, saying exactly what you're saying. Let's all gather around Rishi. Meanwhile, out there in the real world, 60 people have signed, 60 MPs have signed up for the Liz Truss.
Can I just, there's one really very important positive point to make, which we've been making the negative points. What is going on is a complete repositioning of the Conservative Party, dare I say, the rediscovery of conservatism after it's been effectively a Lib Dem con party. It goes back to the Uxbridge by-election. It's, of course, the whole business of Sunak saying he's on the side of the motorists, raising questions about the consensus on the pursuit of net zero. And what you may have noticed is a quite sharp increase in the Tory party ratings in the opinion polls. So we're going to see more of this division. And because, of course, a very important section of the Tory party was fully signed up to net zero.
I think what you're losing here, David, is Rishi Sunak is doing that. Because Rishi Sunak is trying to save his skin. Meanwhile, all around him, there are people saving their own skin and wanting to be the next leader. And that's what this conference is all about: is who's going to be the next leader of the And actually, David, in that way, you're right, because basically there's nobody from the centre of the Tory party.
I mean, what is clear is
they were thrown out by Boris Johnson.
It is a competition for the right of the party, which is right. We're going to agree on something, but this is the really important thing. You're seeing now the beginning of a sharp shift of the Conservative Party to the right. I think it is the right thing to do. I think that this terrible blur of politics that we've had really for the last 14 years is profoundly dangerous. Big questions need debate. We've had no debate on net zero. We've had no debate on HS2. These things desperately need debate. It's what politics is about.
Luckily for you, you're on a debate show, so we'll be getting into some of those topics in a few minutes. One of the things that caught my eye as well is Lord Cruddas. A speech he gave last night, he was basically saying that Tory party donors should essentially stop funding the party for the moment. He was saying the Tory party has become more democratic and representative of its members. Currently, he says it's become autocratic, dysfunctional, corrupt and anti-democratic. It's lost its identity and who it represents.
That's an attack on Rishi. That's an attack on Rishi Sunak, isn't it? Because Liz Truss was voted for by the membership, right? And we all, and I mean, the membership who are quite tiny and quite old and mostly male and very unrepresentative of the country, and they wanted Liz Truss. Rishi Sunak was given to the country by the Tory MPs. So what Peter Cruddas is causing trouble.
Oh, but you see, that's the bit I can't get my head around. If you guys are trying to retain power and all the rest of it and get re-elected, don't you look in the mirror and think to yourself, you're actually committing a few acts of self-harm? Graham says, don't you think it's ironic, Michelle, that Liz Truss is telling Jeremy Hunt what to do? You're saying that, you're asking, why would anyone listen to her? Well, we'll come on to some of the things that she was saying a little bit later on. But speaking of Jeremy Hunt, he has been talking very, very tough today when it comes to people that are almost, he would argue, choosing to live a life on benefits. He's got them firmly in his sights. What do you make to that, though? Tell me and I'll see you in 2.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Historian and broadcaster David Starkey alongside me, as is the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Someone calling themselves Lady Anne on Twitter says, please can you tell Scarlett that I'm not old or male and I voted for Liz Truss. However, they do go on to say that they're no longer a member of the party, but I think picking you up on when you were saying earlier, it's just old.
No, what I mean, the average age, I think, for a Tory member is 60. Labour is 54, and that was when momentum was at its height. Membership of political parties is old people. I'm glad she's young.
They're extraordinary minorities on both sides.
Of course they are. You have to be mad.
People like us, political obsessives like us, are strange people.
I saw a group of young protesters protesting outside of this Tory party conference. I wonder if I can bring up the clip for you, because I've got to say, I found it a little bit odd. Can I bring up this clip? This is a Young Communist League of Britain.
The working class, victory too! The working class, victory too! The working class, victory too! The working class.
Things we lack.
Victory for the working class, victory to the working class.
All the things we lack.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are
Shall we get back to real life? Shall we get back to real life? Yes.
Well, let me know your thoughts on some of this. You know, I really want to know. Are you? You know, when you see this conference, do you follow it? Are you into it? I started my programme with a comment from Andy saying that he hasn't been gripped by the presentations that he's seen so far today. Do you have a different opinion to him? Get in touch and let me know. But strong speaking coming today from Jeremy Hunt. He has been focusing on people that claim benefits. He's basically saying that he wants to relook at the sanctions, referencing people that are kind of essentially choosing to go onto benefits. Let's have a listen.
I'm proud to live in a country where, as Churchill said, there's a ladder everyone can climb, but also a safety net below which no one falls. That safety net is paid from tax. And that social contract depends on fairness to those in work, alongside compassion to those who aren't. Even when companies are struggling to find workers, around 100,000 people are leaving the labour market every year for a life on benefits. And we're going to look at the way the sanctions regime works. It isn't fair that someone who refuses to look seriously for a job gets the same as someone trying their best.
David Starkey, do you agree with that?
Yes, broadly. What we've done, as always, we've forgotten the great lessons that the Victorians taught us. The Victorians had one brutal principle about welfare. It's called less eligibility. That if you choose to live on benefits, you should be worse off than any form of employment. And frankly, that seems to me to be the proper rule. It's brutal, but it's necessary. The Victorians, again, understood something else that we've completely forgotten. We pay benefits to people in work. This is demented. It means they're underpaid. You know, if a man cannot live off his wage and needs benefits, he is being underpaid. The Victorians understood this too. They abolished what's called the Speenhamland system. And what we've done under the influence of sentimentality, of kindness, of lobbying, is to distort the public finances permanently. 40% more people are claiming sickness benefits. We are completely out of line with the European practice. The European practice pays much more generous unemployment benefits for a shorter period of time and then cuts them off very sharply.
Do you agree with that?
No. I mean, Jeremy Hunt said this because he's got nothing to say. That's the problem. If you go back, Tory party conference after Tory party conference, since I started watching them in the 80s, they've always said the same. I mean, not normally the Chancellor. Normally the Chancellor has something rather more important to say. I mean, they've been talking about benefit shirkers as long as I can remember. And actually, it's really tough being on benefits, and you do have to look for a job, and you do have to go. Most people.
But the bill is about 150 billion.
The big bill is pensions. Actually, the really big bill is pensions. And if you want to do everybody a favour, you can drop your pension and you can just live off what you get on GB News, right? The biggest bill is pensions.
I'm happy to say I have much more substantial income, but as any sensible and provident person does. Now, it just seems to me that the reason that why taxes are at this all-time peacetime high is because we've let the entire welfare state skew, and it is profoundly dangerous.
This is absolute nonsense.
Why? Tell me why it's nonsense.
I'm just about to say, David, nothing. We've been talking this talk since the 1980s. It's been.
But we've got it wrong at every stage.
It's been getting increasingly difficult. I mean, my sister, who is a volunteer with Citizens Advice in Dorset, said where rural poverty is appalling. I mean, people have to walk to the job centre because they can't take buses to sign on. Because if you don't, there is a problem about a mismatch of jobs. People are encouraged to get jobs, and this is all about red meat. This is what it is. It's not real. It's not real. They're just going to make
this is absurd. I'm saying it's the most basic arithmetic. The state is spending more than it can afford
because of pensions.
Because of welfare. No. Welfare is enormous and is. I would agree there's a profound danger as a society gets older and you have the triple lock that pensions too get out of line. But the fundamental problem is welfare. The fundamental problem with our pensions is we never tried to do what Beveridge wanted, and we never made it a funded system. And again, we've got catastrophic problems, particularly with state pensions in education and state pensions in the health service, where they're not funded. We've mismanaged finance grossly. Both parties.
Would you concede, though, because, I mean, I've got some stats here. Apparently, according to the OBR, they estimate that 1 in 8 of all working-age people will be claiming some form of disability benefits by 2027. They say that will cost the taxpayer £77 billion a year. We talk about people that have been off sick. There's a lot of people now that are going off sick.
With backache.
For example, with mental health issues and stuff like that. And there hasn't really been any re-evaluation to the framework in terms of who can work, what work looks like, how that is for quite a number of years.
You can't expect a hard left.
David, actually, it is my turn.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. What I think. I mean, year after year, benefits are and eligibility is made tougher. And I mean, I remember in 2010 coming across a woman I know who was terrified because she was going to lose her eligibility. She had such mental health problems. You just had to look at her to see them, and they were saying you have to get a job. And actually, there is no question that you don't get sick pay for any length of time without being tested. And of course, there will always be the odd person who swings the lead. But actually, there are an awful lot of people.
Why is it that there are so many more sick people? Why is the number suddenly gone through the roof, which they have? What mysterious disease?
Presumably, it's things like long COVID. I mean,
rubbish.
I certainly...
Simply rubbish.
Well, it's certainly when The Spectator looked at it, a right-wing magazine, right? When The Spectator looked at it, they were shocked. They were shocked at the level of illness. And it's illness, actually. It's not people who just want to take time off. I mean, it's...
But see, there's an enormous... Sorry, let's just try and pull back from this. There's huge evidence that the worst thing you can do with many forms of mental illness is to retreat into isolation. That having to work, having to socialise. I know, I've been through it. I've had at least one breakdown. I'm very familiar with this. And it seems to me that we're in the moment now of fetishising, effectively, the self-declaration of illness. Doctors seem to me to be increasingly inclined simply to spare themselves the trouble to sign people off.
What do you think to that at home? What do you final word?
Well, no. I mean, I actually agree. I think work is good for people, right? I absolutely agree. I think that work, that good work makes you happier and makes you and actually helps you physically, right? I think so. It's not that I want, but I also know that sometimes it's really, really tough.
But sorry, again, let me cite both the Bible, Lenin, and Karl Marx. He who will not work, neither shall he eat. We have, seems to me, to have created a society of pure indulgence.
I just think this has been going on for decades.
Can I just ask you a really simple question of principle? Do you think there should ever be a situation where anybody who is able to work could choose, actually, I'm not going to, I'm just going to live off benefits? Do you think anyone should be allowed to make that choice in this society?
I mean, mostly no, right? But I think there are always exceptional cases.
See, I absolutely categorically do not think anyone that's able to work, physically, mentally able to work, I don't think anyone should be able to choose to live on. What about
women looking after young children? I mean, that's one of the biggest. I mean, if you're talking about welfare, David, it's actually single mothers, right, looking after young children.
I'm afraid we have another problem about encouraging single motherhood.
I don't think we do encourage single mothers. We make it really.
We've removed.
You've had a nervous breakdown. I've been a single mother. It is bloody tough.
But we've removed all the social stigma, which was essentially
thank God that my
right.
children were not suffering because of it.
Well, very different opinions, as you can tell, on this panel. I'm interested in bringing you into the conversation at home. GB Views at gbnews.com. That is how you get a hold of me. I'll be reading some of your comments out in just a second. We mentioned Liz Truss, didn't we? After the break, we'll be looking at what she has to say when it comes, you guessed it, to taxes. See you in 2.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Historian and broadcaster David Starkey alongside me, as is the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. We've just been talking about people on benefits. They are now in the line of sight for Jeremy Hunt. Mick says, Michelle, don't forget, they're going to be putting up the wages now to £11 per hour. That is indeed correct, Mick. But Mick is concerned. He's saying that he worries that this is going to put people out of work. You're saying that businesses won't be able to afford it, shops will put the prices up to equal out the bill, and the costs of living crisis will continue going up and going out of control. That's mixed thoughts. Kaz says, if you do receive benefits, why aren't you asked to go out and volunteer? You could help back the community in that regard as well. Ivan says, leave the pensioners alone, you lot. Lots of kind of mixed. Leslie says that people should be encouraged to return to work, but is there enough support or training for them? And Nick says, I run my own recruitment agency. I have done for years. He says there are absolutely people out there who will do anything, he says, to avoid working. They will often, he says, give wrong contact details so the recruiters can't get a hold of them. But they will say to the DWP that they have tried to get a job. They have registered. He says there's not enough staff to get in touch with those recruiters and actually check what is indeed happening. We'll keep your thoughts coming in. We spoke about Liz Truss, didn't we, earlier on? Let's listen to what she has been having to say today.
We need to unleash business across Britain. We need people to want to invest in our country. We need businesses to be able to expand, to grow, to create new jobs, to create new ideas. That's why I'm calling upon the Chancellor at the autumn statement to put corporation tax back down to 19%. And frankly, if we can get it lower, the better.
Oh, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the Hunt household. When he gets these messages from Liz Truss, I've got a message for you. I wonder if he goes, yes, thank you, because unless you came along and told me that, I wouldn't have thought of it myself. I wonder how he feels about those interventions. But don't forget, right, Jeremy Hunt, when he was campaigning to be leader last year, he said that he would immediately reduce corporation tax from 19% to 15%. That's what he was campaigning on, one of those tickets. That was one of his primary planks. Of course, it didn't. It went the opposite way, up to 25, I think it is. Do you think it should be reversed, that tax cut?
No, I don't think it. I don't think it should. I think that Liz Truss going on and on about growth is Everybody wants growth. I mean, it's Rishi Sunak wants growth. The Labour Party wants growth. The Labour Party talks about nothing but growth. I mean, it's one of these things where you just go on and on and on as though nobody else has ever thought about it. I mean, this isn't the way it is. And for Liz Truss, who clearly has a large following in the Conservative Party and also among Conservative MPs, amazingly enough, for her to go to that conference, upset a very, very difficult conference already by saying as though she got anything right last year.
Yeah, but she will be arguing, David, as a lot of people will say, the Conservative Party, one of its core kind of themes, one of its core strengths is supposed to be lower taxes.
Indeed, but you can only have lower tax if you've got lower government expenditure. Otherwise, you have violently unbalanced budgets. And the reason Truss fell wasn't the tiny cut in the top rate of tax or whatever. It was because she decided to incur a huge new welfare cost in paying for people's fuel, which could have been on a scale that actually dwarfed the payments for COVID. That's why her government toppled and the markets reacted against it so violently. You see, I think, again, we need you're quite right. These are things that have just gone round and round and round in circles. Now, there are countries that have done very extraordinary things. One of them is Ireland, which has deliberately cut its corporation tax to, 5 or 6%, which attracts huge international companies. Now, the whole of the rest of the world, and particularly the EU, has ganged up on them, saying, oh, we have to have a minimum charge of corporation tax. Is it 15% or whatever it is? Curiously, our corporation tax is already the lowest, even at its high rate, in the G7. If I were in Hunt's position, I would emulate Ireland. Why should Ireland get the benefit of speaking English when most of the time it spends its time hating England? And we could then attract all those huge companies like Microsoft and whatever would be much happier having their bases in London, and they're only in Dublin because of the tiny rate of corporation tax.
The other reason they're in Dublin, of course, is because they're in the EU. They're in an English-speaking country, so that they can get all the Americans and Australians and all the English-speaking, and they're in the EU. That's the other reason.
But equally, we are the IT centre of Europe. I mean, the astonishing creativity. You know, I go back and forwards to King's Cross. You just look at that area. Another place I go to frequently is Cambridge. Yeah. And we're not playing to this strength by sensible fiscal measures.
But I think we need to play, and I agree we need to play to that strength. And I mean, you know, lots and lots of Italians actually came over because their tax system is so chaotic that they'd rather
Ours is now becoming so.
No, they'd rather pay, this is according to my accountant, they'd rather pay higher tax.
Gosh, a socialist with we're having public exposure here.
I have a freelance. Somebody has
so Richie has to have an accountant.
No. But what he said is that these people come over and they're young tech people, and the Italian system is so chaotic. They'd rather pay more tax and actually know what they're doing, and then leave it to somebody else to do.
But can we just?
We're right about the techie stuff, but I mean, what worries me is it's ill thought out, and I mean
everything is ill thought out. I mean, particularly Hunt's
Truss is ill thought out.
She's ill thought out, but I mean, Hunt's just wants.
Because there's a lot of my viewers that actually will sit there and say that her strategy was the right strategy all along. This growth. You're mocking it.
But what you're saying is tax cuts in themselves do not generate growth. This simply seems to me to be a fundamental myth. You would have to rethink the entire tax system. I think there's another thing that we really haven't thought about, which is why are we so obsessed with these listening to somebody like Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy Hunt's speech was completely incoherent. On the one hand...
And flat and boring and said nearly nothing.
Flat and boring. But he's
Right.
incoherent. He increases what? He increases the living wage. That automatically knocks everybody else's wage up because of differentials. So on the one hand, they're calling for pay restraint, and on the other hand, they're doing the thing which is guaranteed to... You know, it is incoherent and ill thought through.
And of course we should have a simple tax system. And one of the things we should have is that earned income and unearned income should be the same. Instead of having capital gains tax much lower than income.
There's a conversation.
There's another conversation.
Another day. I'm sure that the corp tax in Ireland, I thought it was about 12.5%. I'm sure eagle-eyed viewers will get in touch and let me know either way. One of the things that Jeremy Hunt did say, and I quote, that growth happens not from quick fixes, but from long-term decisions. Interesting then, because it's been backwards and forwards and a lot of messing around about HS2. I'll get into that in a sec.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Historian broadcaster David Starkey alongside me and the former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. We were just talking about benefits and sickness a second ago. Louise said, Michelle, I work in one of the most deprived areas in Liverpool, and I can tell you and your viewers firsthand, there are lots of people out there that can work and they choose not to. They play a mental health card, and it's wrong because ultimately, she says, those people that have genuine mental health issues then get pressured into going into work. Malcolm says, what a load of rubbish you are all talking about on your show. When you've got serious mental health problems, it is impossible to work. He tells me about his brother that's had a serious mental health condition for 23 years, has attempted his own life and is psychotic. I think... Really, Malcolm says here, the reason the government are having a go at these people now is because these people are easy targets. The Tories divide and conquer. That's what Malcolm says. And Malcolm, I think the viewer there, Louise, what she's saying is a lot of people perhaps will use things like mental health when perhaps they're not struggling as much as they perhaps say that they are. And it is to the detriment then, people like Malcolm's brother that really are struggling, because then they come in the firing line for these serious reforms. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. HS2, it's almost become like the hokey-cokey. Michael Gove was asked about it. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I agree that we've been too London-centric in the past, and that's why we have a long-term plan for levelling up with lots of different
So you
ingredients
must think that
in it.
HS2 should go to Manchester then?
Well, I think levelling up involves doing many more things
Give us
than
your
just
position on
transport
that. Should it go to
infrastructure.
Manchester?
Well, I think we need to make sure that we're getting absolute value for money
Mr. Gove,
from it.
come on, you must
But
be able to have an opinion on whether it should go to Manchester or not.
I absolutely think the most important thing is making sure that when we level up, we take into account all of the things that we need to do. So we've shifted Arts Council
I know,
funding.
but should it go
We've
to
shifted
Manchester,
research
yes
and
or no?
development funding. Well, we're going to have to...
Should it? Not will it?
We're going to
should
have
it?
to look at every conceivable pound that we spend on transport in order to make sure that we
I know,
get
but
value for
still
money
not
from
an
it.
answer to the question whether you think it should
My
go
answer
to
to the
Manchester.
question.
All right.
Right, yeah, so did you get that? Are you any the wiser as to what HS2 is doing when it comes to Manchester? Now, I don't know who it is that's leaking this information, that perhaps they're going to scrap the Manchester leg of HS2. But whoever that is within the Tory party, I cannot process what they are thinking, because surely they must realise that they are causing their party immense harm, not least because they're sitting in Manchester having this conversation. But anyway, where do you stand on this Manchester leg?
I think it's appalling. I mean, we're going to end up. I was never in favour of HS2, right? I thought actually what much better to spend an awful lot of money in the north on connectivity between the.
But initially from the Labour government, wasn't it?
It was Andrew Adonis.
But I can still disagree with the Labour government.
He's rational. I've been attacking the Tory government most of the programme.
But what is incredible, right, is so they say, oh no, you know, it's not. This isn't London-centric. This isn't London-centric. This will be the north. And now we're going to have HS2 from Birmingham to Acton. I mean, how many billions are we going to spend from Birmingham to Acton?
It's about 45 billion.
I mean, it is completely ridiculous.
It is completely mad. But then, of course, totally mad, but Paul Johnson said that the whole thing of the Institute of Fiscal Studies said that the whole thing made him weep. But the fundamental problem, and as he said, the curse is the beginning of it. It was fundamentally misconceived from the beginning, and like most things that the coalition government inherited from New Labour, they persisted with it and they made it worse. I mean, look at the things that are absurd. You deliberately choose not to follow as it were, the gash that's cut through the countryside by the existing the London and Western Railway. You decide to do what? To send it through an area of outstanding natural beauty. And do you know what? Everybody's been saying, why is it so expensive? Do you know it goes through tunnels that are 9 miles long? In the whole of that journey from the romantic outskirts of London in Acton it doesn't even get into the middle of Birmingham. It stops short of the centre of Birmingham. Apparently,
so who would use it? Who is going to use
it's grotesque, but let's continue agreeing, because it's such fun to agree. You will actually see the sky for 9 minutes of the journey. Now, this is a piece of mismanagement by everybody, and remember, all political parties are broadly subscribed to this. The government has subscribed, the civil service has subscribed, the North has subscribed, and everybody, and it's a word I cannot use before the watershed.
Do not use words that we can't use.
No, I am fully aware. Everybody has made a very bad error that even Lawrence Fox couldn't describe properly. Yes.
One of my viewers, John, he said if they'd have started HS2 in Manchester down to Birmingham, do you think at all they'd be having a conversation now about stopping it reaching London? He says, I don't think so. You raise a really interesting point there, John, because if this...
Why didn't they? Why didn't they begin it in the north?
When it would have been much easier, and you wouldn't have been going through areas of outstanding natural beauty. But you see, the other really interesting...
Why? There is beautiful areas of outstanding beauty up north.
It's a much simpler... It's a much simpler... Sorry, this is... If you actually look in continental Europe, first of all, they've a much less population density than we do.
Yeah.
And you've got far more open, flat countryside. And the other thing, we've made the terrible mistake of not following the example of HS1. With HS1, we learned from our mistakes. We moved the terminal from Waterloo to St Pancras, and we got it right, and I use it every day.
There you go. Robert, Jared says, Michelle, why don't we just tarmac over the work that's been done so far for HS2 and turn it into a road? Lots of people talking about the out-of-control budget. I concur. How on earth is it so possible that these massive public sector projects seem to be going so wrong?
They do it every time.
Whether it's
you
the
could
installation
guarantee
of an IT system, whatever it is.
Why are you a socialist if the public projects always go wrong?
Well, there you go. Look, there you go. That is all we have time for. But yeah, I will leave you to ponder that question. If you care so much about levelling up, why did HS2 begin down south as opposed to the north? And yes, people will say, well, the business case didn't stack up, Michelle. That is the argument I hear all the time. Well, make it stack up. That is your job if you're passionate about levelling up. But for now, look, Scarlett, David, thanks for your company. Thanks you at home as well. Don't go anywhere. Nigel Farage up next. I'll see you tomorrow. Night-night.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bright and breezy sums up tomorrow. A bit of a grey start in the south, and there will be some showers, particularly across the north and the west. Overnight, some pretty heavy rain moving in. A very soggy one out there right now, thanks to this area of low pressure. Some intense downpours, even the odd rumble of thunder likely over the Midlands and eastern parts of England over the next few hours. Could be very wet indeed for a time across parts of Norfolk especially. But that all tends to scoot away through the early hours. Many places will become dry, certainly across Scotland and Northern Ireland, some clear spells. A little chilly here, down to single figures, but staying quite mild across the south. Temperatures may stay in the teens in the capital, but quite a grey start to Tuesday. Still some outbreaks of rain over the East Midlands, East Anglia and the South East, potentially still around for the rush hour. Gradually pulling away through the morning, then brighter skies, showers for western Scotland, parts of northern England, a few for Wales and Northern Ireland too, but much of the south and east having a largely dry afternoon. A fresher feel, temperatures mostly in the mid-teens at best, and similarly on Wednesday. The wind's a little lighter on Wednesday.